Welcome to the November 1st, 2022 work session of the Webster Grove City Council. We have one council member on Zoom. Emerson, you can hear us and ready to go?
I can hear you.
Excellent. We'll pretend you said yes, you were ready to go too.
I purposely did.
Does anyone have anything that they want to talk about, review on the regular agenda? No? All right, then let's do issues and updates. And Emerson White, you're unmuted, so why don't we start with you?
I have nothing at this time, Mayor.
That was easy enough.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just go around this way. So Dr. Peoples.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. The only update I have is I wanted to extend a huge thanks to the police department and fire department for a really terrific public safety day. It was a fun event. Hopefully everybody had a chance to at least stop by either location, but there was lots of families and folks that attended, and it really was enjoyable. So hopefully it's just the first of more to come. I certainly want to thank both Chief Curtis and Chief Ellis, Chief Ellis really spearheaded the event. And again, it was really nice to see. So thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
We're not that close.
Oh, geez.
I knew what you meant, though.
Mr. City Attorney, how about that?
There
I'm just going to go with Neil because then I can't go
Now I
wrong.
can talk, yes. I just want to say informally that Halloween is alive and well in Webster Groves, Missouri. Having been on Clark and on Bacon, there were lots of people out. I'm talking about hundreds of children that were out, and it was a lot of fun, and it was very safe. So
Excellent. Sarah?
Nothing to report today.
You're up.
The BDC met last Thursday and the commission wholeheartedly welcomed 2 new members at their most recent meeting. 2 more members will be rolling off, so we'll have a couple vacancies then. Workinwebstergroves.com is doing well, and that's our job bank. There are 32 jobs currently posted, and the commission is planning a robust advertising campaign to help attract job applicants. So if you know anybody looking for a job, tell them to go to workinwebstergroves.com. I attended the MSD open house a couple weeks ago. That was kind of sponsored by Green Space and the Sustainability Commission. Staff from Public Works and the Planning Department were there. I spoke with some residents that were in attendance and also several representatives from MSD. So it was a great time to learn about the recent flood events and just also about the infrastructure that's over in that neighborhood. And then I also attended the grand opening of Firehouse 2, which was a lot of fun. That was very well attended and pretty exciting to meet and talk to new people. So that's all I got.
Thank you. David?
Nothing for me, Mayor.
Karen?
And I have nothing today, Mayor.
Emily?
I was at the open house with MSD as well. That was well attended. And then Pam and I went and kind of looked at some of the area as well afterwards, which was nice to kind of see that in person. The Firehouse 2 open house was great. And right after that was Make a Difference, or during that was Make a Difference Day. So tried to go see a couple of the other projects. There were so many projects going on, but they all started early. So by the time I got them, they were wrapping up, but did great work at here in front of City Hall, at seed collecting and Brewery Park and lots of places around town. So that was a really successful day. And then next week at the Historic Preservation meeting, which I believe is November 9th, we have the Lostron public information session for anyone interested in that. That's all I have.
Katie, anything from you?
No, thank you.
I do have a few things. The Arts Commission met this morning, and they're continuing to work on coordinating their activities and mission with Webster Arts so that there's not competition, but rather collaboration there. The library board also met. The most immediate topic of conversation there is that the Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft, has proposed a rule that would block state funding for prurient library materials for youth. That's a rulemaking. Anybody who might want to go to the Secretary of State's website and comment on that rulemaking, feel free to do so. there's another couple of weeks out, and no one seems to know exactly what the rule means yet. And it is a proposed rule. It's not a rule, but they have their eye on that. I attended the second of 4 Safe Kids, Healthy Communities project. It's a collaboration with the school district, the city, a number of organizations within Webster Groves. And they're looking on kind of a commitment community-wide for how we really think about child abuse and put ourselves in a position to be as helpful as we can in avoiding that in our community. Commander Jillian McCoy has been attending, and hopefully once we get further into the kind of results of the process, she will come and talk to us about what that means for our community. I want to draw your attention to a letter from Philip Mitchell that came in our packet about early childhood opportunities, or in his argument, lack of opportunities within our community. If you're interested in talking more about that, will you please let me know? I've spoken with him several times, and so I'd like to hear from you all. I'm also going to offer my thanks to the police department and the fire department for the open house. I also am going to ask that Jenny Starkey and the police department not engage in any blackmail of the lovely pictures of me dressed in full fire gear and full police gear. I do not look nearly as good as our firefighters and our police officers do, because they know how to wear the stuff. But I, it was well attended. It was a great event. I have heard from a couple of people since that time that they took their families and really had a great time. And it was like up in the level this time. I mean, we really got a notch above in terms of what people could do hands-on, but also in terms of demonstrations. And to me, the demonstrations were great because it really helps people understand the difficulty of the jobs that are being done. Last thing on my list, the boards and commissions subcommittee continues to meet. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that by January, we should have a set of proposals for the council to consider about our boards and commissions processes, and about maybe some general guidelines for boards and commissions as well. All right. Did anyone forget anything while I was talking there? No? All right. So we will start now with the update from the Traffic Advisory Commission. We are lucky to have with us the chair. If you'll come forward and stand right here, introduce yourself, and maybe tell us how long, I don't know how long you've been chair.
6 months, maybe.
Okay.
Something like
So,
that.
and I'm going to ask you to be very cognizant of the microphone so that people at home can hear you as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mayor Arnold and council members, thank you for this opportunity to talk with you today. My name is Chris Redford. I live at 113 South Gore, exactly 1 block from where we are right now. So I'm familiar with this building somewhat. So I thought a bit about what we've been working on in our commission, and I put together, or maybe you have a copy of this summary that I sent out.
Mm-hmm.
The work that we do falls into one of about 4 categories, and I'll quickly go through those. The first grouping are the things that we most often, probably 80% or so of what we do. And these are issues that are brought forward by citizens or by community, like a neighborhood, like a street. And they are speed limits, traffic signs, traffic lights. And many of these, the police department can, based on their guidelines, answer them directly, and they don't bring them to our commission. They tell us about them, but they don't come to us for input. The second group in that are issues that are still maybe parking or maybe speed limits, but they're not clear cut. They're not things that the police department feels comfortable making a call on them. And so they bring those to our commission and ask our input. And some of these are judgment calls. So we provide them, we're a bit of a sounding board, if you would, for the police department. And then finally, in that group, there are some problems that are brought to us directly. They come to our meeting and they speak at the beginning of our meeting and express a concern. And again, maybe it's a speed limit or it's a parking issue. And so we give input on those. And our input primarily goes to the police department, and they then maybe work with Public Works about moving a sign or changing a parking requirement. So those are pretty straightforward. The second group are, we find that sometimes many citizens come forward with a very similar request. And so the thought is that rather than address them individually each time they come up, it might be a good idea to write a policy or a statement about this is the way we're going to resolve these. And a good example of that has to do with street widths. There are many neighborhoods, especially in the older part of Webster, where the street widths vary. So one street might be 25 feet wide, and a block away the street is 30 feet wide. Well, people would like to know, can I park on both sides of that street, or can I only park on one side? Well, rather than answer that question time after time after time, we're working on a standard that would say, if your street is this wide, you can get one lane of parking. If your street is this wide, you can get 2 lanes of parking. And so that way we can give the police department and the city a kind of a guideline, and people will understand then what the rules are. The third grouping are cases where groups come forward and they have a very specific but a request or concern, but it's broad in nature. It's more than just one neighborhood or one street. It maybe affects many people. And a good case here is North Elm. So North Elm is a very wide street, 4 lanes plus. And people driving on North Elm feel empowered to drive a bit faster than they should. And the neighbors have complained about this, first of all, because it's a safety problem, but more importantly, they can't get out of their driveway because they can't go from 0 to 60 in 30 feet. And so they've asked our traffic council to consider what we might do to make that safer and better for everyone without sacrificing the numbers of cars that go up and down that street every day. And so that's a project that we're working on right now. And one of our members is a traffic engineer, and she's come up with a clever idea for how we might address that with simply changing lane striping. So that's a project that is going forward. And then finally, there are some cases where issues that are not coming forward necessarily from the community, but we're seeing things that are happening in other communities. And the one that we're talking about right now is something called Complete Streets. And I'm not qualified to give you all the details on that, but I can give you an idea of what that's about. So I'll give you a really good example. If you have a street, and maybe it's a 4-lane street, so it's a higher speed limit street, and then on either side of that, you have parking. That's a scary situation because you have people doing 30, 40 miles an hour right next to people who are parking on the street. And it's hard to back in and get out in a street that has that high speed limit. Well, the Complete Streets approach to that might be to put a very narrow strip on either side of the traffic lane, and then have another lane outside of the street that leads to the parking. So maybe you have angle parking or parallel parking, but it's along a street that is where the speed limit is much, much lower. And so that's safer for the people who are trying to park, and it's safer for the people who are trying to drive on this busier street. So that's one example of some of the ideas that fall under the heading of Complete Streets. So we have a group that are looking at and there are many, many, many guidelines that they've developed for this. So the thought is that we would go through that and find out which of these would be meaningful for Webster Groves and which would be inappropriate. And then we might come to this council and to share with you our recommendations. So those are the kinds of things that we work on. Can I answer any specific questions?
Are you looking for, is this an update or are you looking for like guidance or feedback or direction?
Well, I'm told that all the councils are going to do this, so I'm offering a,
So it's like kind of more of an up, I just wasn't sure.
Well, I think if,
How to look
you know,
at
if a Complete Streets is an initiative, we need to essentially charge them with going ahead because that's a big project.
That's
It's-
a big.
And,
Really big.
and, you know, I hesitate to, you know, not comment on, have us not comment on these things, have the commission put a lot of work into something and then us just automatically saying,
Right.
not automatically, but saying no after they've done it. So I do think this needs to be a time for us to comment on some of these initiatives as well. I do have one other question though.
Yeah.
In our packet, and Clark Coatailing is here right now, we got a copy of a mission statement, a vision statement, and some goals that aren't outlined in the document you gave us. Is that a statement on behalf of the entire commission, or is that Clark's perspective?
so I think that because our role seems to be growing a bit. I mean, if you looked at what we did a couple of years ago, it would all be in that very first bubble.
Mhm.
But some of these broader issues have come up. And so we want to create, if you will, a charter that kind of shares with you and you with us, what are the appropriate things for us to work on? So yes, we are working on that, but we have a lot of irons in the fire right now. So
Yeah, so I guess I'll say this very directly. Your mission and vision is created by the ordinance that creates your board or commission. I had this conversation this morning with the Arts Commission, and we do have boards and commissions that have changing perspectives a little bit. What you all are asking to do is that not outside the confines of your current ordinance. Everything on this fits within that ordinance.
sure.
I think we as a council, I'm going to speak for myself as an individual council member, but I do think our councils in general, if every single board and commission comes up with their own mission and vision statement, we lose our supervisory authority
Mhm.
because these are organizations that are to make recommendations to us as the elected representatives. So I want to be careful about how we begin to do this. Especially in those kinds of situation where essentially you're, the way you put it, trying to broaden your authority outside the written ordinance. And I don't think that's really what you mean to do, but
Right.
it's an advisory body.
Well, I don't think we're intending that we would write our own mission statement. I think we would draft something and then bring it to you and invite your input on that, because frankly, it's you that should be telling us what we're going to do.
Right. I don't know that we need a mission and value statement for each board and commission. Just being on the board and commission subcommittee and looking at how many we have and what that would do, you know, we're trying as part of that process, which I know we haven't brought forward to everybody yet, but we're trying to like standardize things, simplify things, make sure things are, you know, consistent. And I don't know that having individual mission vision statements for each board and commission is in keeping with that.
I think we're putting too much emphasis on the terminology here, mission and vision and value statement. I think what, in my mind, and I'm not, maybe I'm biased, but what this commission has done is outline a paradigm by which they can all operate cohesively and cooperatively together. So I don't care what you call whatever it is they drafted, whether you call it a mission statement or you call it a philosophy. What the idea behind it, at least from my perspective, is that it gives them the opportunity to say, hey, this is what we're trying to work towards together. And knowing that anything that they do is going to need or require the ultimate approval of either the administration or the city council, it gives them an opportunity to say, hey, this is us, what we envision us doing as a body. And I don't think that's necessarily bad.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is to officially create mission and vision statements doesn't make a lot of sense to me. focus on, and frankly, I will be the first to comment specifically on a policy. I love the idea of pursuing a complete streets plan so that we are standardizing our decision-making in those areas. And it's part of the walkability, bikeability initiatives that we've set aside money for already. It makes perfect sense. What I'm saying is focusing on those kinds of things, that's already under your purview. I'm not sure what all this other stuff is, why that's required. And I don't want it to become an expectation across boards and commissions, myself at least.
I just think, I'm starting to be a little confused as to what the authority is of each commission, that because look at the broad discretion we afford, for instance, the Architectural Review Board. They get to determine without, to my knowledge, a written policy as to how many windows or where those windows should be placed, and tell homeowners they have to spend more money on the outside of their homes rather than the inside of their homes. To me, it just seems like we are picking and choosing the discretion that we're affording each individual commission. And I don't think that this commission has gone off the rails by any stretch of the imagination by merely drafting, again, whatever it is you want to call it, a mission or vision or value statement, to cohesively and cooperatively work together to provide policies and platforms and ideas to this council and to this administration to make a better community.
I mean, I'm reviewing some of these things that are written, and I'm kind of with David as far as the definition of what these things are, but I think, I'm after looking at the ordinance, it's pretty dry. There's not much definition there. And I think for them to have a purpose that maybe is just short term, meaning 3 to 5 years, is okay. And wouldn't that be part of a commission's purview to do that? That this is kind of their focus for right now, or their statement of purpose, other than
What the
3
ordinance
sentences,
says.
yeah, that are in the ordinance.
Yeah.
So
I'll
I
let
understand-
somebody else comment. I don't need to comment again right now. So if anyone else has comments.
I think of like the sustainability plan and how we've approached that in terms of the Sustainability Commission put together a formal proposal, brought it to us for feedback, and then brought it to us after feedback with, some actionable steps and things like that. And if that's kind of the goal here, I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess I'm not sure what our role is in approving or not approving or whatever, if there's a mission or vision statement within the group itself. I think about the Police Community Engagement Board went through something kind of similar, but we also were part of that process to some extent
But that's all in the ordinance too. Sorry. to
right. No,
interrupt.
it's
Yeah.
true. And I don't know if this is part of kind of what you guys are discussing in the subcommittee meeting. I just like kind of where that definition all falls.
Well, how about we get back to not talking about mission and vision and talking about some of the actual policy ideas that they want to pursue? Because I think we can all agree that that's the meat of what you all want
Yes.
to work on.
Yes.
So
The list that we
comments
saw-
on that?
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable, and, bringing things like I don't have it written down, but the standardized complete street, is it complete streets?
Mhm.
Or what, to council with a proposal of this is what we've looked at and how we would envision that being implemented, similar to what sustainability did. I mean, I think.
I
it's
mean,
reasonable.
what they have here, I think is pretty good and succinct, and
Mhm.
they're, everything is relevant, and everything is, it does relate to other commissions as well. What I think is good is that we're starting to define goals and purposes within the commissions, and then they're learning how they can work with each other to take these new ideas to the community.
I guess if we don't want our own boards and commissions to define their own goals and come to us and say, these are the objectives we want to do, then it's incumbent upon us as a council to ensure that we are providing them the goals and the objectives that we want. And we haven't done that, to the best of my knowledge, except for maybe sustainability, with any of our boards and commissions.
Well, and that's the purpose of having them here periodically, which we
Yeah.
are now restarting. And let me be clear, I have no
Oh,
problem
yeah,
discussing the goals that they bring to us, because I think you're exactly right, is that that's the only way boards and commissions can function in a way that helps us with policy development and policy review. I do have, again, I want to go back to, and I think if you would like to let Clark speak, that's your choice as chair of the commission. I think he's been trying to say something. I do want to go back to what policy proposals are we talking about? Because his email is a little different than your document, and I'm not sure what we're talking about exactly in terms of the kinds of things specifically you want to work on. I know complete streets. I know that, you know, there's some standardization of policies that you want to take a look at. I would be curious to know what's the role of staff in that, because I know some of those are written applications with criteria that already exist. And is it changing the criteria that exists? Is it coming up with different ways of applying? I'm not sure what that means. Or maybe it's a whole slew of things because there's some written policies and some that aren't.
Well, first of all, I'll share with you that we have a fairly new commission in terms of the people who are
Okay.
participating. And these are not people who are asleep at the switch.
Oh, I'm sure they're not. We've interviewed them all. So I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, so we are kind of feeling our way, if you will.
Yeah.
Issues come up, we talk about them, we decide what's the best way to address this. And then somebody gets a side job to pursue that or look into it. I would certainly welcome having Clark come up here and talk with you. That would be great. So we're going to get there. And I'm really here to share with you that we're open to whatever you want us to be. We think that we're heading down the right road, but that doesn't necessarily jive with what you think we should be doing. So I'll be open about that.
Yeah, and I think this is a good conversation because, to be honest, most of us, I've actually watched a few of the meetings recently. Most of us have no idea what you've been working on, really. So, I mean, it's hard for us to give feedback if we don't know, and that's our responsibility because, you know, we need to get reports from your commission so that we can be a little more helpful.
And just to give you a little perspective, if we go back a couple of years and we're really talking about mundane things that come up routinely, we really never interfaced with the council. We interfaced with the police department.
Right.
And they provided kind of our game plan or our task list. And we have been quite happy with that. So, but this sounds like a slightly different approach. And we're open to that too.
Yeah.
And, you know, like I think to myself, but I know that we're in the process as a council determining our goals and everything like that, but like, it's clear to me just based off of budgeting, some of our goals is environmentally friendly sustainability. And so I question, or I propose possibly is when you look at the complete streets, you look at it from that perspective, potentially, since that is at least a unified goal of this council. And so I think there are certain things that I think we as council can provide to you to say, hey, the complete street sounds like a great idea, but let's narrow the focus a little bit to help you guys along that path.
Other comments? Does anyone have any objection to us asking the Traffic Advisory Commission to bring us a more detailed presentation of what complete streets is, what it means to us, what kind of action should be taken, so that that's sort of the first big project? Because as I understand it, it's a significant project. It's not just a little checkbox here, checkbox here.
I think that's a good
Hey,
idea.
Clark, if you're going to talk, you have to come to the microphone.
Okay.
Two quick things. One, the mission statement sort of came together because we as Chris said, we have a group of, enthusiastic people and we want to be more proactive. We see the existing ordinance and it is, as Pam said, it's nothing. I mean, it's really nothing in there. So we wanted to be reactive, which that is in response, but also proactive and collaborative with the other commissions. So that's sort of, I guess, statement of purpose might be a better thing. So David came to our last meeting and he said, well, we're going to slow up. This has to be done by the council. So we said, how about if we, and we voted on this. We said, let's present this to city council for them to tweak and come back and update our ordinance. So that's that part of it.
Okay.
The complete streets, what we would recommend, and we haven't taken a vote on this, is but but it's really more encompassing than what I think our commission's capable of doing. I think TrailNet or another organization like TrailNet would be willing to put a proposal together for you to consider whether you want to go with it to help us develop a Webster Grove specific complete streets policy. I think that's really the way to go to get the professionals involved. We've talked with the Sustainability Commission. We'd like to do it collaboratively. And there's money we think out there that's been given that could be used for them developing that policy. So that's what we would recommend, is that we go to TrailNet for them to update their 2014 plan, which is out of date, and also give us a proposal to help us develop a complete streets policy for Webster. So I think that would be our recommendation, as opposed to us trying to come up with what a complete streets policy is for Webster.
And I assume that interaction with TrailNet would put a dollar cost on what that is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have implemented a lot of those.
From the first
recommendations from the
TrailNet.
first one.
Yeah.
So-
But
And
then
I-
that's
Good.
yeah.
So it's
And
not-
I've talked to them, they said,
It's
that's
next
a little
level.
outdated. There's some things in there we wouldn't recommend today because things change. So they would like to update that and also give us a proposal with a dollar amount for them to help us develop a complete streets policy. So I think that would be our recommendation from the Traffic Advisory Commission, to let them give us a proposal. And maybe there's other organizations that also could do that, so you can get it competitive. Yeah.
What happens?
Be at the microphone.
What
Sorry, guys.
happens though,
You can
Clark?
both stand
Clark.
there together. It's okay.
What happens though after that proposal is provided? What do you envision going forward?
You know,
say
I
we-
envision a policy is, as things get updated and implemented and go through your budget process, some of that stuff gets done. Some of it never will get done. But I look at it as a policy when you're looking at how we're upgrading our streets and our roads and so forth, being able to implement that and working with the department to really figure out how much some of that would cost each year.
I mean, effectively, what it sounds like the commission is looking towards is not only doing what the charter envisions it doing, but then doing more like a select committee and looking at it from hey, what can we do with complete streets? So I think that as a council, we need to determine, do we want to go the complete streets route and look at it from a
Correct.
holistic view like that?
If I can give you my take on this, and thank you.
I won't leave.
Good. I don't think we're ready to say this is the solution. I think we do need to talk a bit about it and what the alternatives, but I want to clarify one thing. We're not proposing, and I don't think you are proposing, that we get out our checkbook and we write a check and all of a sudden all the streets and all everything changes. No, this is going to be somewhat like building codes, where when we update a street, we're going to hold these requirements. That's what
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I don't want people to think that all of a sudden we're going to take on this monstrous project and all the streets in Webster are going to change. That's not the way it's going to work. It's as we move forward, we want to do it right.
And I think what TrailNet can do is help it make it specific for us. It's not something that we pull off a shelf. We're going to do exactly what Kirkwood's doing, or Maplewood, or whoever.
Right, or San Jose. Okay,
Yes.
other questions?
So are we fine?
Support it. I support what they're proposing.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you feel like you have some instruction now from us as well?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
thank you.
Well, that was a successful little section there, so thank you.
Again, thanks for the opportunity.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Unbelievable. Unbelievably, we are way ahead of schedule. Is it at all possible to do one of our closed session things in 20 minutes and then come back to a regular meeting?
Yes.
So Pam, that will be you.
Oh, yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for closed session pursuant to. Don't
Oh,
know.
I'm sorry, 621-010 subsection 1 and 3.
Okay. Attorney to client privilege communications, Missouri statute 6.610.021, open friends, 1 closed friends. And personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open friends, 3 close friends.
So
Yeah, sorry.
That was a second.
Mayor Arnold,
yes,
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes,
Councilmember Alexander, Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
so we, if you don't mind, will ask you to wait in the conference room. We're going to be in closed session for about 20 minutes and then we're going to come back. And I know that some people will be here to help us celebrate Rebecca now. So if you wouldn't mind going across the hall there to the conference room just for a few minutes, please.
What did he say?
Recording,
Good to go.
okay. Welcome to the November 1st meeting of the Webster Grove City Council. Please note residents can share in-person comments, virtually on Zoom comments using the raised hand option. You're also free to send us the good old fashioned regular mail if you'd like. We welcome your questions, ideas, comments. If you would like to make a comment, there are speakers cards that are over here on the table. Please go ahead and fill one out and leave it with Jenny on the end here so we make sure to recognize you when it comes time for remarks from the community. We ask that those comments be limited to 3 minutes. They are public comments. Council typically will not respond to them, but we do want to hear from you. I think I've covered my opening statements there and we'll have a roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss.
Here.
Councilmember Franklin,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
here,
Councilmember Alexander,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson,
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
All right, we're going to start the evening with a lovely fun thing here to recognize the executive director of the Webster Groves Rock Hill Shrewsbury Chamber of Commerce, Rebecca Now, who is going to, of all things, retire. I mean, come on, what are we supposed to do without you? This is actually a significant loss to our community, but a gain to the world of history because I know something in her future has, because it always does, to do with history. So I'm going to come down and Rebecca, if you want to come up, I'm going to read your proclamation. We can take pictures. Council, please join me. And there's a lot to talk about in this.
I died, we'll see.
I'm using my, you're gonna have to sit in the middle. Uh-oh. All right, are we ready? Here's our proclamation. Whereas Rebecca Now was named Executive Director of the Webster Grove Shrewsbury Rock Hill Area Chamber of Commerce in August of 2011. And whereas during Rebecca's tenure, chamber membership grew 20% and the Santas on the Loose 5K run was established and the event experienced continued growth that allowed the chamber to contribute over $10,000 to the St. Louis Crisis Nursery to help prevent child abuse and neglect. And whereas during the pandemic, the chamber created a special honoring event, Creativity in Crisis, to honor individuals, nonprofits, and businesses that learned to create new ways of serving the community during the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown. Over 35 yard signs and plaques were hand-delivered to the award winners. In addition, under Rebecca's leadership, the chamber created a crowd-funded account to give grants to businesses at risk during the COVID-19 shutdown. And whereas Rebecca was presented with the Alan J. Hoyner Person of the Year Award by the Rotary Club of Webster Groves for the year 2021 for exemplifying the qualities of outstanding business leadership and high ethical standards. And whereas the city of Webster Groves wishes to thank and honor Rebecca Now for her exceptional service to our community and for her service to all the other surrounding cities in our Chamber of Commerce. Rebecca has made a positive impact on our businesses, the lives of our residents, and all those in our chamber circle. Now, therefore, I, Laura Arnold, Mayor of the City of Webster Groves, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, November 8th. I know you love that it's an election day. As Rebecca Now Day in the City of Webster Groves.
Let's just all take a step that way.
Let's take a step back. And Rebecca, if you would like to say anything or nothing, it's your choice.
I want to say thank you very much for this honor. I am humbled and so appreciative of this, and it was my pleasure to be of service to this fantastic community, not just Webster Groves, but Shrewsbury and as well Rock Hill. This is the home of my childhood. Whenever I walk through Blackburn Park, I remember being a Girl Scout there. I have many, many, many fond memories of my childhood, and I'm a boomeranger. I lived in California and came back, and I'm so happy to be here and to have been of service to you all. Thank you.
Dan, we usually say you're welcome to stay, but not allowed to be offended.
Oh, I have to show you something, David. So we're gonna do this. Let's sign it before.
Just remind me.
Yes.
Oh, got it. Okay. All right. We now are to the point in our agenda where we welcome remarks from the community and visitors. I have just one card tonight, and we all know who that comes from. Mr. Dave Buck. There you go.
Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. First of all, I have a win-win proposition. I will attend your 3-hour strategic planning session this Saturday, November the 5th. If some of you agree to attend Webster Sings from 7 to 9 at the community school concert hall. I think that's a win-win proposition. Okay. What I want to do is just, well, I have to kind of apologize because I do believe in strategic planning. I like it. I think it's great that you guys are doing it in a real dedicated fashion. But I can't stop thinking about it. And one of the things I just wanted to share today is what I think, in my experience, is one of the great strategic planning questions, which is, what is your higher purpose? Or more specifically, what is the higher purpose of Webster Grove city government as made up by city council and city staff? Not your purpose, but your higher purpose, because they are usually very, very different. Higher is inspired by, as you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, the pyramid, the 5 levels that start with physiological, functional, survival needs and safety needs, but they ladder up to higher needs, deeper needs, more personal, emotional needs of love and belonging, esteem, and finally self-actualization, which is achieving your full potential as a human being. And to me, purpose is a great word, and it's different than mission. Mission to me is forward-looking. It's your action moving forward. Whereas purpose is about why you were put here in the first place. So let me go back to the original question. Fill in the blank. The higher purpose of Webster Grove city government is, as made up by city council and city staff, is blank. Is it to provide city services? See, I think that's your purpose. But I would challenge you to think about what's your higher purpose. How do you impact personally and emotionally your residents at a higher level? See, fire and police force, that's all survival mode. That's all safety and security, right? I'm talking about moving up the pyramid and challenge yourself to answer the question, what is your higher purpose? I'll be the first to admit that I may be wrong, but my bet and hope is that your higher purpose is deeper, higher, and more meaningful to our community than is your functional purpose of providing city services, et cetera. I have one.
Time.
Yeah, I got one sentence. Asked differently, what is the top of Webster Grove's community hierarchy of needs pyramid?
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. See you Saturday.
Yep, we'll be there. Does anyone have any new business to add to our agenda? All right, we will go on to our unfinished business. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd, could you call for the third reading of Bill number 9202?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third reading of Bill number 9202.
Second.
Bill 920,
An adoption.
I knew what you meant. Bill 9202, third and final reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 60, Article 7, Section 60.975, Schedule H of the Code of Webster Groves, parking prohibited, to restrict parking on Lockwood Court.
Any discussion? All right, let's have the vote, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right, thank you. The bill is passed. Councilmember Alexander, could you call for the third reading of Bill number 9203, please?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9203.
Second.
Bill 9203, third and final reading. An ordinance authorizing the city of Webster Groves to enter into an intergovernmental cooperation agreement for the investment of public funds through the Missouri Securities Investment Program.
Is there any discussion?
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Dr. Peoples.
Yeah, so just as a reminder and for those in our audience, this is a state authorized investment pool program for public funds. And so we haven't currently invested anything within this program. It gives us the opportunity to do so at a later date. The real reason why I wanted to share about that as well is because it's timely in terms of our financial policies that you all have been discussing over the past several months and revamping, reviewing, making sure that they are as current as we need them to be. So as you all know, we do have an investment policy. It actually was adopted in 2010, so it has been some time. And within this policy, it says that it should be reviewed every other year. So every 2 years, and that there would be investment updates annually. I'm not sure that that's been done. So this is a great opportunity as we look at policies for the council to consider revamping this 2010 investment policy and perhaps having some more frequent updates and reviews of it rather than biannually. So I would put that out there for food for thought and on your table of to-do items.
Thank you. And I think we, as we've gone through these financial policies, would welcome some recommendations because we want to be timely and we want to, use our oversight responsibility as we should.
Great.
Any other discussion? All right, let's have that vote, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, we are on to new business. It's funny that it's new business because it continues to be business of this council. And this is additional conversation around our flood buyout possibilities. Is that Mara? Is that you, Dr. Peter?
I'm going to start.
All
and
right,
then,
off
of
we go.
course, Ms. Perry remains the expert on all things flood. So if there's any specific questions. We've got a very, very short presentation, just 4 or 5 slides, which mostly is just kind of a recap.
My wife like that. That's what you just showed me.
All right, thank you. So as you all know, on August 8th, President Biden declared a major disaster for several areas, including St. Louis County. That declaration covers weather-related events from July 25th through July 28th. The city sent 2 letters of interest for FEMA for our substantially damaged properties and 1 for those that were less damaged. And we did that. It's hard to believe that it's been in September, but we did that back in September. There is a very small print list of the damaged properties. What you see there are the addresses and whether or not they were substantially damaged, the percent damaged, the year that they were incorporated into the flood zone, year built, and then the month, year purchased. And then that last column just says if they're a rental property or not. We're trying to provide all of the information that we could think of that council may need. So some of this may be relevant and may not be. The new information that's on there would be the first 2, 843 North Forest and 844 East Pacific. We were notified late last week, actually, I believe late Thursday or Friday, that those 2 properties were repetitive losses. We did not have that information before. And just for people who may be watching, that's not information that the city had access to. We were trying to get it. So that information is housed within SEMA and FEMA. So in reviewing our applications, they then shared back with us that those houses had previous damage and would be considered repetitive losses. So what that means for you, and Ms. Perry can share more, is that if FEMA were to approve those applications, they would approve them at FEMA's cost being 90% and the city's cost being at 10%. So that's certainly a very different split than we had heard before, but that again is just for those 2 properties and no properties at this point have been approved. So, and Ms. Perry can fill in more, but our next steps after learning that was again to fill out some more paperwork. That has already been done. I want to applaud the planning and development staff. I believe it was done the same day, or if not, the next day. So we very quickly turned that information around. So there, of course, are financial implications for the city. The city's cost to acquire those homes. And again, this is a moving target. These are the numbers that we've been provided. There's, there could be appraisals, other things, but these are, rough numbers so that we could see where we stand. So the substantially damaged properties, and I won't read all that to you, but a little over 303,000. And then you've got the not substantially damaged properties, which again, we haven't heard back on any of our applications, but it's probably unlikely that the not substantially damaged would be approved considering all of the applications across the St. Louis area.
I'm sorry, you said it would or would not?
Would not.
Yeah.
And we have no, FEMA has not said that, but when we look at all of the letters that have been, applied for from other municipalities across the region, it's quite a hefty amount. So I would think as FEMA is also prioritizing that if we were able to be funded, it would be substantially damaged. And then you see the cost there for the repetitive loss, and then all homes currently requesting buyouts would just be shy of $1 million. Then there's some fundamental questions, and I would imagine that council's been receiving some of these questions. These are some of the questions that staff see coming in. They're questions that we see there through email, or we've had residents ask us. These are some of the questions that are on our city socials as well. So our acquisitions or buyouts of substantially damaged properties, the city's role. Considering the budgetary realities, are buyouts of substantially damaged properties the city's priority? Other questions for consideration is if buyouts are approved, what impacts would there be to city investments, infrastructure services? What would be put on the back burner essentially? And then if buyouts are approved, does the purchase set a precedent for future flooding events? Those are really just, quite frankly, some conversation starters to have some dialogue amongst council, perhaps give staff some additional direction. No action is being asked for this evening. It's also an opportunity, aside from council having that discussion, but again, to ask Ms. Perry any specific questions that you have. I think that might have been.
There's one more.
So in boiling down the options, and I don't mean to indicate that this is an easy decision, but there really are 3 options after you all talk about priorities, budget, and really deciding the precedents in terms of setting it for the city. So the options are waiting for a final decision from FEMA regarding approval on buyouts, or making the purchases without waiting for FEMA's decision, or determining that the city will not move forward on buyouts without FEMA's determination. So just to boil that down or to distill it down a little bit more, we can either wait on FEMA's decision or we can move forward. And again, for people watching, this is being shared because there have been, of course, several requests to make the decision more timely ahead of receiving FEMA's decision. So that's why that's on the table. So that's really, and of course, the danger of moving forward without FEMA's decision is if we are not approved, then the city would carry the full boat, so to speak. So if we weren't approved and the city had decided to go ahead and move forward, then we would need to fund all of it, which may be a priority. Again, that goes back to the discussion, excuse me.
The 100% versus 25%.
Yes, and that 75-25 again was a ballpark. We would have to wait and hear back from FEMA because it's up to 75%. We're not guaranteed to be funded at the 75%.
Could we go back to that slide where it lists the properties?
Yeah.
So can you again explain to me the difference between a property that is a repetitive loss versus substantially damaged 100%? So the difference between 844 East Pacific and 1051 Coleman?
I can, but I think we'll let the expert.
All right.
She'll do it much better.
Thank you, Mara.
FEMA has a database that includes information regarding properties that have requested funding or have claimed on their insurance due to previous floods. That wasn't information that we have access to. And so as we initially provided our letters of interest to purchase, they reviewed that first level. And in that first level found that those two particular properties did have repetitive losses under the current ownership is our understanding. So if it changes hands, that makes a difference in the repetitive loss numbers. So those two particular properties were the ones they contacted us about and said that they would be moved into the repetitive loss, which meant we actually separated. There's now 3 letters of interest out there. So there's one still for the substantially damaged, one for the not substantially damaged. We have a third one now out there. And Travis did an amazing job. He got it out same day when they asked for a third one. He updated that one. And then a couple hours before council, they did let us know that we could start the paperwork to move that one, just those 2 properties, start the paperwork to FEMA. So those 2 had enough information on them that we can move that one forward. We're waiting on the other 2.
And what percentage will FEMA pay for a substantially damaged repetitive loss property?
That's the 90%.
Is that for sure 90 or is that up to 90?
They gave us it falls now into the 90-10, but we do not have a final approval from FEMA. So I think my understanding is the number is still up to 90, but it is not definitive that it is at the 90.
Okay.
All right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, was there a business as well in the mix originally that was?
So there was not a business these are only the ones that requested buyout.
Okay.
So you have to remember there were still others that were damaged to different extents.
Those are the only 3 notices that we have.
Yeah. These are the only ones that requested buyout.
Can I ask, is there any chance that any of the others will be deemed repetitive losses later, or are those 2 kind of considered the final list?
I believe that they've done enough review and determined that these are the only 2 repetitive loss. I don't believe there's going to be an additional change to that. But everything keeps coming at us pretty quickly.
Okay.
And for those to be considered a competitive loss, both instances of loss had to have occurred within the last 10 years.
That has not been made clear to us about whether it was within the last 10 years. We have heard differing information on that. In one case, we've heard last 10 years. In another case, we've heard it's related to ownership because it's the same owner owning it during a certain period of time. So I'm not completely clear and I can try to get clarification. Every time we get something in, we've been asking for additional clarification and it does take a while to get some of the answers back from SEMA.
And 1, 2, 3, 4. So 6. So yeah, it was 6 that were substantially.
It was 6 and 6, and now it's 4 substantially damaged, 6 not substantially damaged, and 2 repetitive loss.
Okay, so the repetitive is what's put in that third category.
Yes. And those 2 were, as you can see, 100% considered 100% damaged, which is the amount of damage exceeds what the property, and it's just the structure that we look at, what the structure was worth.
The amounts on that, the other slide, then I just wanted to clarify on that, where we have the substantially damaged properties, that does include the repetitive loss properties as well?
So the repetitive loss are now another line separately, and that's the 10%. So the 57,873 would be the 10%, assuming we get the 90/10, and that's just the 2 properties.
So then I just wanted to know if that top line still includes those as it had.
We
in previous-
removed
Okay.
those. Yes, we removed those. And so that's why the substantially damaged number has gone down,
Okay. That makes
which means the overall number has gone down. If you remember previously, we were at about, I think, 1.1 million. And now it's down to 944,000.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go
Yes,
ahead,
Councilmember.
Emerson.
Yeah, can you go back to the list of properties again? So those 2 units are rental? Is the owner of the rental applying for this, or the residents inside the home?
The owner of the property is who has to request the buyout, and that is who requested the buyouts.
Okay, thank you.
So, the slide with the 944, that's best case scenario. FEMA ends up picking up 75% and 90% respectively of the categories.
You are correct.
And so there's a possibility that number, it's not going to fall, but it could decrease. I mean, it could increase.
It could increase. Yeah. There's been some questions about, we use St. Louis County's numbers when we establish certain things. There's been a lot of conversation about whether that number's too low, whether that number's too high. People do have the ability to get an appraisal on their own, an independent appraisal, and SEMA will consider some of that additional information. But in most cases, if your property is deemed a higher appraisal number, your percent damage goes down, which means that your buyout is not as likely potentially. Because again, they had a lot of properties to address, and they're probably we would assume they're going to focus on those that were the most damaged first.
And we have no indication as to when our 3 applications will be processed and a result will be provided to us.
So today, late this afternoon, we were told the repetitive loss has been moved from the SEMA review to where we can apply for the FEMA review. So that's just for the repetitive loss properties. 2 properties. I think that came a little bit faster than we thought, but we haven't heard about any of the others. And there's still a lot of paperwork and deadlines. If I remember correctly from the email, it's December that we have to have that paperwork in.
Karen, go ahead.
And you indicated that of the 3 options that were given on, if I think the following slide, or nope, not that one, the next one, and the next one, there you go. If you make the purchases without waiting for the FEMA's decision, if you make a decision, if we were to make a decision before waiting for FEMA's decision, and FEMA came back and said no, then we're on the hook for 100%.
We would be.
Yes.
So thank you, Councilwoman Alexander. And we have had inquiries, I would say weekly, from some of those homeowners urging us to make our decision before, which is why that's listed up there. They would like some closure to the situation and have asked that. So again, it's a difficult discussion and decision point for the city, not knowing if FEMA would fund those.
And then the other question is, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I just want to be clear. FEMA is not saying that they will pay up to 75% or 90%, and then the borrower needs to fund the other the remaining balance, or they have to get the remaining balance funded. They're saying specifically that their paying anything is contingent upon the city making up that difference. Is that correct?
I believe that to be true, Mara.
Can you clarify the question one more time?
So they're saying, so it's just like buying a house, okay? The lender may tell you, we'll only lend you 80%. You need to come up with the other 20.
Correct.
It can either be your own funds or it can be a gift from your mother. You know, but they will only pay you the 20. Is FEMA saying, or SEMA saying, they will provide up to 75% and then up to 90% in the case of the repetitive damage. And then that's the gap that has to be filled by the borrower. Or are they specifically saying that gap has to be filled by the city?
I would want to look into whether there is an option for the gap to be filled by the borrower. I don't know if I've ever, I don't know if I've seen something like that. My understanding is when we do the letter of interest, it's the city is putting in the letter of interest that they're going to be providing that difference. I don't think the borrower can make up that difference, or
I think we need to clarify that. Yeah.
Councilwoman Alexander, we will. So it is
That's
a
a
very
new-
interesting question.
I haven't thought of that question.
I do believe, so yes, please ask.
I will.
Travis
Will
is
ask.
probably typing right now and already forming the question to ask. I do think that it would be the cities, because part of the discussion that I didn't list in those questions is, what does the city do with such property should we acquire it? Because the information that we have seen from FEMA is that it does become the city's property, and that there are several restrictions on what that property use can be. Essentially, it cannot be built upon in the future, but we will ask and get that clarification.
Is there anything prohibiting the homeowners from quote unquote gifting us that other 20%?
That's another question we can ask them.
Because I mean, they have some insurance, so you would think there would be some insurance proceeds that if they had the money. And we're saying, hey, we'll go through the process and do what the federal government's requiring, but we're not going to pick up the tab. You got to come up and still pick up the tab to some degree, or help at least with.
We'll ask that question as well. It's interesting.
Yeah, because a lot of times if you look at insurance and how it's covered, there's a question as to what other coverages exist. You know, so is there coverage or assistance that's there that can make up that 25% or what have you, or not? Or, you know, so that's a question that I think needs to be answered, because it's how is that gap being filled, or is the gap being filled by the city as well as other funds? That could be.
Madam Mayor, I have a couple of comments I need to make.
Yeah, Emerson, let's finish, before we get to comments, let's finish with questions, if you don't mind. Are there other questions for Mara at this point? And if you do have a question, please go ahead.
No, Mara already answered my one question.
I do have a couple of questions, and I don't know if it's for Mara to answer, or Dr. Peoples, or Laura Mayer. I was just curious about, I mean, I've kind of done my own homework, walked around and have talked to MSD about the conditions at the site that caused the flooding. And I wanted to know, do we have any information from the city of Brentwood about the construction that they have been doing, or the Army Corps of Engineers, on what impact that had to contribute to this flood, or possibly more in the future? Have we heard, do we know anything about that?
So I sent a letter that I believe was drafted for me. I mean, I know it was drafted for me, but I believe it was drafted by the people in this room for me, to the Army Corps of Engineers, asking about a review of the potential impact of Brentwood Bound on this flooding incident. We have not yet received a response from the Corps, and have followed up at least once, I know. So we'll continue to do that. Actually, Dr. Peoples and I were discussing yesterday other avenues that we might try to get some response from the Corps.
I mean, I would be just curious to learn a little bit more about the project itself.
So,
And, you know, what work specifically was done,
yeah, and if you, I did,
other than what I can see on the plan.
yeah, I watched, the city of Brentwood did have a presentation in one of the meetings shortly after the flooding incidents in which their city engineer talked about the plan and how it stood up under those flood conditions. They did not include any analysis of those of us who were downstream from the project. But if you, I mean, there,
So
it
that's
is
for their
for their
city
portion
limits.
of it,
Yes.
correct. And so, and, you know, by their estimation, everything worked the way it was supposed to. We'd like to know whether it worked, whether the way it's supposed to work is harming us or not.
Mhm. That's my question.
Other questions? You shouldn't go very far because
Right here.
so we're to the point now that we have been gathering lots of information. By my count, that's, I think, the 5th staff presentation that we've had on flooding. We've had SEMA here, we've talked to MSD. I don't think that anyone on this council doubts the level of devastation that this has caused for the homeowners. I think we all understand that they have things to deal with that certainly I can't imagine. So the question now becomes, you know, we have to start making decisions. We've done a lot of information gathering. We still have some questions, obviously, that we'll get some answers for. But it is only fair, I think, to the homeowners, to our residents, that we begin to talk about where we each stand on these buyouts and whether we're supportive of them, whether there are contingencies that we might be supportive. And so, you know, we have the slide here that has our options. You know, one of the things that we need to decide is, are we going to make a decision before we have information from FEMA? I think that impacts quite a few decisions for homeowners, our timing of decision. And then something that's not really on that slide that became obvious today, we now have 3 categories rather than 2 categories of homes, and do we treat them differently? And so I think we do need to take a minute for each of us to talk a little bit about where we are on this issue at this moment. And again, we're not voting tonight. This isn't a definitive decision-making point, but it is, you know, kind of updating where we are. Emerson, since you asked to make comments, I am happy to start with you if you'd like.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you return to the slide with fundamental questions on it for me? So I guess I need to ask the city attorney, what responsibility does the city have in buying out these properties?
None. You have no responsibility. There is no mandate or obligation to do that from a legal perspective.
Okay, so here are my comments. I agree with Mayor Arnold that we need to be clear on the direction that the city is going to go to these homeowners. I don't think it's fair for them. One, we can't afford the buyout. We have budgetary restraints that we need to continue to consider. Going back to these fundamental questions, what happens if another area floods and Webster grows, which it will, and they do? What will we say as a president for those future flooding? Because the citizens will be looking to us to follow suit on what we did for this one, this situation. And we're going to start going down a road that we can't afford. And I would rather let the citizens know right now, you know, what we can and what we cannot do. And we all know our budgetary restraints, that we can't afford it. You know, if we're years from affording something like that. So my comments is let the homeowners know that the city cannot participate in any type of buyout.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. We're all going to have something to say tonight, folks.
Well, I mean, I certainly understand how devastating that this can be, would be for the homeowners. But my concerns as well are, first of all, with the budgetary constraints that we have. the cost of doing this and the precedent that is set for future flooding events. I mean, are acquisitions, buyouts of substantially damaged properties the city's role? I don't feel that it is. And then the attorney has told us that it's not our legal obligation to do so. There's also a risk in which, I wasn't aware of that until tonight, is that if we were to make a decision, prior to the FEMA's decision, then that puts us on the hook for 100% of the properties. And again, that's just a considerable concern where there's budgetary constraints, there's a precedence that's not sustainable, and it just, I solely, would not want to trade places. I understand that that's just a hard place to be in, but I just, as a steward of the citizens' funds, I don't know that I feel good about using city funds in a manner that's not sustainable going forward to assist other citizens that would find themselves in the same place.
I can speak if you like.
Please, thank you.
I guess my thinking about this has been more about impact on community than on just these homeowners. Because I do feel like this is some of these now specifically we are told are repetitive losses, and we're going to continue to see these events. And I think one of the things we're going to have to face the reality of is the impact of climate change in our community. And this is something we need to be a little better prepared for in the future. And what that may mean is that we need to be prepared to buy out properties when it's appropriate. I don't think that if we come to some buyout decision here that involves us buying out a property, that it means that every other flooding event ends in buyouts. But I don't know that it would be inappropriate to have that discussion in some of those cases. So I'm of the opinion that we maybe want to set a cap on how much we're able to potentially spend. And then if FEMA is able to come in under that, or to leave our responsibility under that, if there is some way we can set a little bit of a contingency to wait to see what FEMA says. I just, particularly for these repetitive loss properties and those that are fully 100% damaged, I do feel like we have a leadership role here, and there is an environmental component to this that I think we have to pay attention to.
I have been struggling with the concept of what is the role of local government in a situation like this, not only thinking about a natural disaster, but also with climate change. And regardless of the wisdom of it, it seems like the federal government has already made that policy decision and made local government a part of the decision and of the equation when it comes to natural disasters. I can't really speak to the climate change aspect of it, but as a result, we do have a role here, and I'm not sure exactly what that role should be yet, but I am willing to go down the avenue, apply for any and all federal money that is available. And at the time that that decision is made by the federal government, assess whether this city and our budgetary constraints have the means to proceed. That doesn't mean that I am envisioning that the city will move forward in the event that 75-90% of the funds or of the amount of money that is available comes to us. I think that will be determined based off of our budget. I know that leaves the homeowners in quite a pickle as they continue to wait and still don't have a certainty in the event, even if the federal government were to come through. But I think that this is the role that was envisioned by FEMA and SEMA. And as a result, I think we have an obligation in my mind to continue down this path, with the caveat that merely because we're going down the path does not mean that that we are going to actually allocate any funds to purchase any homes.
I'm of the thought that we've applied for FEMA. We need to wait and hear their decision to follow through in that process. In my own mind, I've always, just to keep it, stay conservative somewhat, that I've drawn the line at the substantially damaged or more, so 51% or more. And looking at this list, we've got 4 out of the 6 that are 100% damaged, and 2 of those would be 90% covered by FEMA. So I would like to wait and consider substantially damaged or more homes. And then I understand that there is a possibility that we could have grants to help cover some of that, our portion of the buyout through MSD and their grant program.
Do we know that MSD has a current grant program? I know that was in their presentation for the future. I'm not doubting you, but
Right.
can we put that list on that on the list of questions to be answered, please?
I can tell you what they told us at the, I don't want to jump in. We were getting ready for an answer. Sorry.
Why don't we,
I'm
why
ready.
don't we let her go straight to MSD and get it from the governmental challenge?
Sure. And we talked to MSD at the open house, and they indicated at that time that it might be possible for us to use
So if I may.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mayor
please.
and Alden. So we can use the OMCI funds, and right now we've got 451,000 and some change in the OMCI funds. That money is slated to use for the upcoming culvert. So it can be used. Council would have to make some decisions when it comes time to pay for that culvert. Right now, that culvert, and we have some federal matching funds for it, is slated for 2026. The OMCI funds, as I understand it from MSD, they replenish at $150,000, give or take a little, using round numbers, $150,000 at the end of every calendar year. We have been pushing, and it looks very promising that culvert would be pushed up to 2024. So if these OMCI funds were used instead for the buyout process, which is certainly appropriate, then we would still need to find probably $300,000, considering the replenishment cycle that EMSD has. So we would still have to find funds. If we were to
that
use
were the
some of
case
that.
in using those funds, then that means that the work that was planned for the culvert would have to be delayed. And then that flooding that we see for the people that live along that corridor in there is going to continue. And so we wouldn't be able to mitigate that issue there that those funds have been earmarked for.
So thank you. And I don't believe there would be the option of delaying it. We would simply have to find the funds, whether that means through other services not being done, other projects not being done. And I say that they wouldn't be able to be delayed because we were requesting federal matching funds. They're not going to wait on us to have our dollars together, so to speak.
But are there future OMCI funds, not already earmarked for the culvert?
$150,000 is reloaded at the end of every single year.
Okay.
So we have $450,000 now. I want to make sure that I'm
And you were
answering.
counting on that 150 each year to 2026
Correct.
to cover the culvert. Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to jeopardize the culvert or have to scramble on how to pay for that, but I do like the idea of, if there are ways that we can find funds for this. I know, when we look at the question of it, is it the city's responsibility? I mean, I would love for the state or the county or MSD to pay for these, but they're not going to. MSD would, when they presented here, they're like, we would love to be able to do buyouts. We don't have the funding for that. It'll be on the ballot in April of 2024 if we want to vote for that. So I think it does kind of fall to us to make the decision where, I still have like lots of questions and can talk about this forever, but I think decision wise, that's what we're trying to kind of get to. I am very comfortable with saying that if FEMA comes back and approves the repetitive loss for sure, and probably the substantially damaged for me, that I feel like we should look into a way to make that happen. I'm less in moving forward with the not substantially damaged just because I do feel like we have to draw a line somewhere, and it is a lot of money. One of the questions is, if we don't do this, then what? Like, we know it's going to flood again. And we're going to be back where we are again, looking at that. And when we look at, does it set a precedent? Well, maybe it does, but maybe that's okay. If we have flooding in another area of town and FEMA approves the buyout, I would be supportive of looking at that as well, at some point in the future, if that should, hopefully not happen, but could. So that's kind of where I am, and like a contingent, yes, probably. With the repetitive loss at the top of the list and then substantially damaged, but totally contingent on FEMA. If FEMA comes back and says, no, I do not think we can afford to buy out properties at 100%. I don't think that's realistic. And I think that if FEMA is not going to buy it out, that says something about how they judge those properties as well. And they've determined that maybe they can stay as buildable lots.
Thank you. Did you finish? Because I interrupted you to ask that question to make sure we got that information. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to finish. Thanks, Emma.
No, I'm assuming we'll have more discussions. I'll have
Okay.
more to say, but I am going to say that it will keep happening and we'll be facing the situation again in the
Ma'am,
future.
speak
So
into
I
the
think
mic
we
for
need-
me, please.
I said, this is going to keep happening, no matter what we do, and to move some properties out of the floodplain seems like a responsible thing for us to do by acquiring them.
So I think that just leaves me now. I'll be honest, I've been struggling with this more than any decision that I've made as a council member or as mayor, because it's easy to see the need and the devastation. It's also a question of, how much responsibility do we have versus how much responsibility the homeowners have as well. I do appreciate learning today about the repetitive loss portion of this, because that's a new calculation that I'll put into here. That makes more sense to me than anything else, is to take care of those two properties. And I want to make sure that everyone understands, we, the city, don't define the repetitive loss, FEMA does. So, that is, to me, they're sort of a player that we, as Emily said, can to some degree rely on their judgment in this process. But, in terms of the timing, I'm not sure that it's really fair to these homeowners to wait through the FEMA process, and unless they're willing to understand that they may want to do things like try and sell their property or accept other kinds of insurance claims and move forward, because, the research that I did said that on average, it's at least 18 months before a full decision is made. And, even after the decision's made, how long until you get your money? So I don't like leaving residents in limbo for that long a period of time. Anybody else with comments they'd like to make?
I don't like the limbo either. I just feel like it's such a risk for us to approve it and not know that we're gonna get covered by FEMA. That makes that $900,000 number a lot higher.
Well, but, go ahead.
Right?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, we also, I can say, Sarah mentioned the idea of a cap. Deciding we're not going to fund everybody now is not the same thing as deciding that we're going to do it all if FEMA says yes.
And to
We
be
have
fair,
a
we
cap.
didn't create the limbo. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, I
this is the policy that the federal government established, and it's the length of time that they're doing. So,
Mhm.
I mean, why I appreciate the fact that I would not, as a homeowner, and I can try to empathize to the best of my ability with the homeowners in waiting. I mean, we're doing as a city, as a local government, exactly what the policy and the law envisioned. So to me, I don't know what more we can do under at least like what I'm proposing, which is we wait to see what FEMA does. That's exactly how the law is written, it seems like, and what it envisions. So while I appreciate and try to understand what the homeowners are going through and the stress and the turmoil of waiting is, it's like, I don't know what more the local government can and should be doing in that position.
And I will say, I agree absolutely with Councilmember Alexander and Councilmember Smith, who raised the issue of funds. even if I came to the conclusion individually that this is something that we should be doing, I just don't see where we have the money to do this at this point in time. And to me, that's the biggest hurdle. I did think of one question for you though, Mara. It is my understanding that maybe one of these homes have been sold.
Yes, it is our understanding, and I apologize, I didn't get more information on it. We had a request for an occupancy inspection for one of the properties, and then we contacted SEMA to confirm whether that was something that impacts it. And they said, yes, it impacts it, but didn't tell us exactly how.
Okay, so that was going to be the follow-up.
Yeah, from what we understood from what they said, we believe what it means is that it was because the timeline of when you had to apply in September, and it was the buyer or the owner at that time that had to request the buyout, that the new owner doesn't get to have the buyout. But we asked for further clarification.
That would make sense.
Yes. Wow, it's gone entirely? Thank you very much. And I would, yeah, if you can clarify that, I think that would be helpful.
We're trying to get clarification because it kind of came out of nowhere that we were requested to do the occupancy inspection for the
Yeah.
sale. But we don't have any, it takes a long time before county puts a sale on their
Right.
page. So we have to rely on people telling us that that sale is happening or is undergoing. So
Right.
we were trying to get further clarification.
You know which category that was in?
It was a not substantially damaged property.
Okay.
Do we know which of these how many of these homes are occupied now? Actually being lived in?
I don't have that number.
Okay.
I
just
do not
curious.
have that number. No,
Okay.
I'd be remiss to
Yeah.
randomly
I
tell you, oh yeah, I think
understand.
all the substantially damaged ones, no one's in. My understanding is I believe no one is in any of the substantially damaged. The not substantially damaged, most people are living in those. But yeah, I'm not completely sure.
Okay.
I can find out.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, please.
Because Mara is wonderful, she gave me a couple of other numbers while you all were talking, and these numbers get to the point if FEMA were not to approve the buyouts, what would our costs then be? Because again, we'd be having the full portion. So just as you all think about this, for the substantially damaged and the repetitive loss, not including the not substantially. So for those two categories, it'd be about 1.8 million. Not insignificant.
No,
Right. Thank you.
that was for the substantially damaged and the
Repetitive.
And the repetitive loss.
So the first six.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Any other questions or comments at this time? We will get this additional information, and then I think our decision has to be, are we going to wait FEMA out at this point? Or are we going to make some definitive decision before that? At least that seems to me to be our next kind of decision point. Is that fair? I am having a hard time looking at Council Member Alexander.
Yeah. I agree with you, Mayor. I think we need at some point to make a definitive decision.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Smith. I need to find my agenda now. Thank you all very much, though, I got it now. For sharing your perspectives. We are now going to move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Councilmember Franklin, does anyone want to remove anything from the consent agenda? All right, Councilmember Franklin?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move for the approval and adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
We have no appointments to boards and commissions this evening. I do believe we have just a little bit more of a closed session we need to do. So Councilmember Bliss.
This would be 610-021 subsection 1 and 3.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed section for attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021 open parens, 1 close parens. And personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens, 3 close parens.
Second.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I know, council members, if you could go see Bud just really quickly while we get on the closed session thing. He wants something to be signed for Rebecca.